Hey, friends, neighbors, countrymen. This is Jerry Ross, the old paratrooper. I'm back here with Mark Herlick on the part two, discussing his career. Again, president of the Long Range Reconnaissance Association. We were just talking, has the dubious honor of being both an instructor at the Reconnaissance Surveillance Leaders Course and the commander, which we'll get into that here shortly. But another Echo 51st guy, and now finds himself as a lieutenant in the 101st Airborne. And let's just
Yeah.
from there, Mark.
So, so I ended up taking command of Charlie First 327, which was really weird because I was still a first lieutenant at the time,
Yeah, that is weird. That's
and
yeah.
I was a company commander with all the company commanders that were company commanders during the surge,
Mhm.
including my former company commander who had me removed from his company
Yeah.
as so yeah, I had that company for, I don't know, I think November of 2008. No, yeah, November 2008 to September 2009.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you picked that company up while you were in Iraq, or
Well, I was what?
were you still in Iraq when you took the company over, or
No, we did the change of command inventories before we came back.
Okay, yeah,
It was easier because he was the guy that I was switching out with was accepted to, I want to say, a master's program for the Army.
hmm
So I ended up, we did it as soon as we came back after our 2 week of reintegration or week of integration stuff. And then we changed command, and then we all we did inventories again, and
yeah,
we all headed out for Christmas leave.
yeah.
So, but we already knew that we were on the patch chart because we were going to Afghanistan
Mhm.
after that summer,
Yeah.
in 2000 in 2000 end of 2009, no, 2010, they were going to head to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So, we started getting a massive influx of new lieutenants, new enlisted personnel. People were PCSing, offensive. Yeah.
Rotating
Yeah.
in.
So I ended up, kind of, as the Army likes to say, molding and building the team.
hmm
Good thing was I got to mold it and build it to what I wanted,
Yeah.
not what somebody else wanted.
Mm.
So, we would go to the field, and I never did buy into the whole you need to be tactical for 72 hours straight.
Yeah.
There's a time to be tactical and there's time not. So we had a phenomenal battalion commander in Joe Ryan, who came from Ranger Regiment. And he is General Pappas now, phenomenal brigade commander.
Mm-hmm.
So they ended up, and then there was Colonel Vincent had the cavalry squadron, I want to believe, and I can't remember who had 2nd Battalion, but all these people I ran into later on in my career.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ryan was a phenomenal mentor as a battalion commander. So, I didn't have any experience as a company commander. So we had Tom Whitfield, Bo Reynolds, and we had Dakota Steedsman came in. We were all the Alpha through Delta company commanders, and we all got along. It was great. It was First sergeant started coming in, so I had a dud for a first sergeant. He would play dominoes with the command sergeant major of the battalion, doing some of this. So there was a little bit of fraternization there, and he just wasn't a good first sergeant. No one liked him because he was not only tactically deficient, he was personnel deficient when it came to being a first sergeant.
Yeah.
Everything for him was the hammer and anvil instead of just sitting down and talking to people.
Yeah.
So I think what set me up for success for that company command is we got back from Iraq and Rear D never did their job, like chaptering people.
Yeah.
So I had a stack of paperwork on my desk and I'm like, let me go through and start looking at this stuff. And there were a bunch of the former commander and first sergeant. There were a bunch of chapter or kick out of the Army cases because they didn't pass height and weight.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, did you get to, you got to see nutritionalists and all this other stuff. Well, they were never afforded that due diligence because we were in Iraq.
Yeah.
Well, I looked at it and I knew who exactly the guys were, and they were really good soldiers.
Yeah.
That had served on, during the surge. So I had all the packets in the conference room, and I had them all come in, and I had the training NCO bring in a garbage can.
Yeah.
And I kicked everybody out except for me and those guys. And I said, look, here's what I'm going to do with these fat body packets. And I threw them in the garbage can.
Yeah.
I said, you guys have 3 months. We're going to give you a PT test tomorrow with everybody else.
Yeah.
And you've got 3 months. If you are overweight, over fat, I really wasn't worried about the overweight part.
Yeah.
Because the state was archaic. But I cut him some slack.
Yeah.
So, word got around and, that was me. So we trained up, and then unfortunately, what I didn't know at the time was there was a replacement coming in for me. So he showed up out of the career course. He was a striker guy before that.
Yeah.
And I was slated to go to the career course. And I fought tooth and nail to stay. But what I didn't know is once you do 12 months, you are considered command complete, even without the career course.
Yeah.
So once you go to the career course and you graduate, you're already considered command complete, and they can send you anywhere.
Yeah. Needs the Army.
Right. So I'm like, okay, I'll go wherever. So that's where this whole relationship thing came into effect. My assignments manager served in Echo 51st with the guy I used to instruct with at Herlick.
Yeah.
With the OCS, got sent to Germany, and they deployed together. So he explained this whole command complete year thing with me. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you got? He goes, I'll make you a deal. I'm like, sure. He goes, if you go to Fort Knox to the Armor Captain's career course, I'll send you anywhere you want. I'm like, well, I want to come back to Campbell. My family's still here because I was still married at the time.
Yeah.
And he's like, fair enough. So I think the guy I was changing with, I think his last name was Peterson. So anyway, I changed command with Peterson. And then like a week later, I was clearing post. And then a week later, I was gone up to Fort Knox, which is, 2.5 hours or so.
Yeah, that's a short drive. You could come home, see your family.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good deal.
So, at the time, I went up to Knox and I reported in, and you want to talk about a culture shock.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
So here I am leaving the light infantry, the 101st. And what the audience needs to remember, I was infantry in the Marines. I came in the Army. I was in Fort Campbell to Echo 51st.
Yeah.
RTB as an instructor, lieutenant, back to Fort Campbell in the light infantry. Yeah. Now you're sending me to Fort Knox. And I rolled. I rolled into Fort Knox, and I already had a place to stay, and I had already done my advanced recon and everything, found a place to stay and stuff. So I reported in to whatever cavalry squadron that was. And it was like a Brunswick stew. It was just a hodgepodge of people. It was couple infantry guys here and there, armor guys.
Yeah.
You had a couple logisticians in there. You had guys that had passed a Q course and they were going to SF as
Yeah.
soon as they finished. You had guys that were doing the career course and branching out to other MOSs. I forgot what they call them now. I'll think of it later. But anyway, so I report in and we take the PT test. And I'm like, PT test, not a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm standing in this hallway and I'm reaching in my pockets for my car keys because I didn't know if they were in the car or not.
Yeah.
Down the hall, I hear this, get your fucking hands out of your pockets. And I'm like,
Excuse
okay. I'm like, whatever. Because there's a line of us there.
Yeah.
So I look down and there's this dude standing down there. And I'm reaching for we had, at the time, it was a gray Army PT jacket.
Yeah, the grays. Yeah.
So I got the zippers down and I got my hands in my pocket and I'm like digging because I always wear oversized stuff.
Yeah.
So if I wear a large, I'm wearing an extra large because I like the room to move. And then he gets up and he's like, I fucking told you. I'm like, hey, dude, I'm looking for my car keys. And he goes, dude, do you know who I am? I'm like,
no.
I've got no clue who you are.
No.
And he's like, I'm the sergeant major, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, nice to meet you, Sergeant Major. And I pull out my car keys. I'm like, look, I found them.
Yeah.
I put it back in. And he goes, you're supposed to stay in that position of parade rest when you talk to a senior NCO.
You're
an
officer.
Right then that switch flips. Book. Yeah. And I go, you know what, Sergeant Major? I know how this game's played. When you talk to an officer, you're supposed to stand at the position of attention. He goes, you got a problem? I'm like, I do not have a problem, Sergeant Major. Not one. He goes, well, if you got a problem, you can go talk to the squadron commander. I'm like, let's go.
Okay.
And everybody, you got to remember, I'm probably one of the few prior enlisted guys there that spent 15 and a half years enlisted and was a senior NCO.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to see some armor guy. I'm like, okay, dude, whatever, So we go down there and you can hear everybody, oh my God, he's going to get in trouble. So I go down there and I'm standing outside this guy's office. And then the sergeant major comes out with this like shit-eating grin, like your days are numbered. So he calls me in there and I should have known as soon as I walked in that office, I was done.
Yeah.
So he had this huge desk, this big ass, it looked like the Resolute desk out of the president's office. But behind it, he had this big, tall, like leather back chair.
Yeah.
He was sitting in it with his feet up on his desk. And it was a big office.
That's not very professional looking. Well, okay.
So he goes, where are you coming from? I said, I'm coming from Fort Campbell, sir. And I'm at the position of attention. And he puts his feet down and he goes, what were you doing at Fort Campbell? I said, I was a company commander in the 1st 327. He goes, gets up and he walks behind me, and then he walks back around and stands over here and he goes, you know where that sergeant major came from? I said, I've got no clue, sir. He goes, he just got off a 6-month deployment. He was in Baghdad. And I started laughing. And he goes, do you find that funny? I'm like, actually, sir, I do. He goes, why? I said, because I just got off a surge deployment in a company command with the 101st. I said, 6 months is like going to Ranger school for some people. And he goes, he didn't find my sarcasm funny.
No, probably not.
He goes, well, how would you like it if I took you out of this class and I made you the special projects officer at my 3 shop? I said, well, sir, I said, I find that kind of hard. I said, I would just pack my car up and go back to Fort Campbell and let Branch know you would let me come in this class. You can't put me in the 3 shop unless I failed.
Yeah.
He was pissed. He was trying to
intimidate you.
Yeah, he was trying to beat me into submission. So he just kind of huffed and puffed and, he's like, get the fuck out of here. I got my eyes on you. I'm like, okay. So I left, didn't think anything of it. And then, you know, passed the height, the weight, the PT test, all the entrance stuff. And then 2 days later, we were having a welcome to the school speech from him. And he's standing there, and I walk in, and I made sure I had all my blingity bling on.
Oh yeah, all your I love me stuff.
Yeah. So the career course was phenomenal in the aspect that I didn't know anything about the logistics trail that an armor unit has.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the weapon systems and everything. It was a great experience because I had some phenomenal instructors. I had an Australian major and a Marine Corps major at the end. It was phenomenal. The people I was in school with were some phenomenal guys. I had a prior service guy that was in the initial, he was in Ranger Regiment, the initial invasion for Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was also on the Jessica Lynch rescue.
Okay.
So, you know, I met some phenomenal people, you know, and we've kept in touch. A lot of us have kept in touch since. But how I got back to the 101st and to the Pathfinder company was the assignments manager showed up, and he's like, I need to see all the infantry guys. So we go into class, we go into the room, and he's like, and he gave us the spiel. He gave us all a piece of paper, and he looked at me and he goes, I got something for you. And everybody's looking like, what the hell? So he goes, if you don't have a tab, don't put down any LURS assignments, because there were still some LURS units around at that time.
Yeah.
So this is probably right around the end of 2009 to beginning of 2010, because it's a 6-month course. So he probably came to see us about 2 to 3 months in.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, and he's like, if you're not airborne qualified, you ain't going to the 82nd, blah, 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 blah. Because he goes, I'm not sending to any schools en route. If you get to your unit and they want to send you, that's great. But due to the op tempo, I'm not sending you anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got this piece of paper in front of me, and he's like, hey, I got a couple spots for you. And I'm like, what do you got, sir? And he's like, how about 18th Airborne Corps LURS? No.
Okay.
He's like, how about I-Corps LURS, which was out in Fort Lewis?
Yeah.
I'm like, no. I said, we had an agreement. He goes, okay, you got a choice. You can go to 4th Brigade or the Pathfinder Company. And I said, what Pathfinder Company? Because there were 2 of them at the time. So he goes, hang on a second, let me look. And he goes, the 159. I said, where are they now? He says, they are back from the deployment to Afghanistan. They are getting ready to go again next year. And I said, that sounds like the place for me.
Yep.
So that was my how I got back to Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
So I go through the rest of the course, and I didn't think I was going to get back, because at the end of the course, I had ended up getting hurt during sports day. My meniscus in my left knee got torn playing soccer. So I went in, they did the x-rays, the MRIs, and the doctor's like, you got a torn meniscus in your left knee. And I'm like, okay, it just hurts when I run and walk. How do I fix it? And she's like, they've got to go in and fix it. I'm like, isn't there like a super pill or something you can? She goes, nope, we got to go in and fix it. But we can't do it here. You're going to do it back when you get to your unit. I'm like, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So unbeknownst to me, once I went and told my instructor, Major Dorn, he had to go tell the colonel. And the colonel's like, he needs to be recycled. We're going to keep him here. And he's like, he's passed his, I've done everything. I passed the final PT test, everything. He goes, you can't keep him, sir. He's graduating 4th in the class and he passes PT test. What there you have no reason to keep him. So as we're graduating, they're reading out, you know, Captain Smith, 1st Armored Division, Captain Jones, 1st Infantry Division. And they get to me, I had pinpoint assignment, Pathfinders, 101st Airborne. And he's like, how did you get that? I'm like, I know people. And I left. So, but during that time, when I was coming home, I had reached out to the interim commander and asked if I could stop by and talk to him, because I wanted to know what I was walking into.
Yeah.
So I did not want to repeat any of the training he was already doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's stupid. It's redundant. So we sat down, Tom Buller and I, who's dude is a phenomenal guy. He's one of those stupid smart guys.
Yeah.
He's so smart, and but he almost had to take summer school to pass West Point.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but we laid the groundwork and we did all this training stuff, how we're going to go about this. And that was when I said to all the lieutenants, if you don't have a tab, pack your stuff, you're going, or you find another job.
Mm-hmm.
And then I talked to the NCOs, the senior NCOs, the platoon sergeants. I'm like, you ain't got a tab, get ready to go,
Mm-hmm.
or find another job. And it's, for all the people, the tab it's not the end all be all, but the first thing you get looked at as an infantry officer or senior NCO in a LURS company, in a Pathfinder company, is the first thing they do is they look at that shoulder. They're like, look, and it is kind of a rite of passage.
You've paid your dues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I ended up coming back to Campbell, taking command of the Pathfinder company. And then I was down to like 2 lieutenants, Buller and Wolford.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had already planned out what we're doing until December of 2010. Mm-hmm. We had planned all the way to Christmas leave. Ranges, NTC rotations, marksmanship, maneuver ranges, school slots. We were looking at ATARs and Ranger School, Pathfinder School were coming. And it was, what are we going to do? So I sat down, and at this time I was I was Copenhagen guy, and I would put a big dip in my mouth, and I would lean back in my chair, and I would look at this dry erase board in the training room, not my chair, but the training room. And I'd be like, what if we do this? Decentralize operations. Because we were not a traditional Pathfinder company. We didn't have, I think that MCoE called for about 60 people. When we deployed, we were at 110.
Oh, wow.
So we had Pathfinder platoons, and we sat down and we went through and we organized into Pathfinder platoons with gun teams attached to each squad. Not a weapon squad, gun teams attached to each squad.
Basically, 3 heavy teams.
Correct. So, and we had a headquarters platoon, but it was robust enough where I could split the headquarters element up. Half would go with me and half would go with the XO.
Yeah.
So at this time, I had a quasi XO because he was scheduled to go to the career course, Buller. Yeah. So we decided that we were going to send a Pathfinder platoon, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, to NTC with each aviation task force we had within that brigade. So we had a Black Hawk battalion, we had Chinooks, and we had attack. So they task organized into their little task force that they were going to deploy with. So each had a slice of whatever, and I just sent a platoon with them.
For the benefit of guys who aren't really familiar with being with the Pathfinder company, can you kind of lay out what the modern Pathfinder company missions were?
So the modern, so when everybody thinks of Pathfinders, they think of D-Day.
World War II. Yeah.
Right. So unknown factoid is the 101 Pathfinders, their lineage goes back to D-Day. The lineage of the Pathfinder company I was in goes back to the LURPs.
The LURP company.
In the LURS D. So when they disbanded the LURS D at the 101st, it became another Pathfinder company.
Yeah, okay.
So that's how that ended up happening, because the aviation, they went to 2 aviation brigades in the 101st. So it just wasn't traditional Pathfinder, established drop zones, established HLZs, stuff like that. We did it at Campbell. We called our own drops and everything, but we were also doing non-standard sling loads, which there's nothing in the book about it. It was trial and error. We ended up coming up with a marking system for the cargo bags under NVGs. You know, when we were in Afghanistan, we were also doing doctrinal basic infantry 7-8 patrolling. So, because when we found out where we were going to be the only infantry unit in the area. So it was also mounted in MAT-V's patrol. So we did a lot of vehicle training. So we also did HF training. So when they went to NTC, we had them do HF shots. There was establishment of hide and surveillance sites.
So you were
reconnaissance and
quasi
surveillance.
Pathfinder LRS unit.
Absolutely. So, you know, it's because before we would go do an air assault, you would want to send some people out to Overwatch.
Yeah.
So kind of like the Air Force does now.
Yeah.
So it was you know, like I said, it was just a mishmash of stuff, you know, but it was also downed aircraft recovery.
Yeah. Dart team.
CSAR, yeah. So we did a lot of training on that. So it was traditional and non-traditional Pathfinder missions with infantry stuff put in. So I sent the XO with one platoon to NTC. The first sergeant went with another one, and then I went on the last rotation.
Yeah.
It wasn't to be certified by NTC because I had no one that could, no OCs guide us.
Yeah.
We were kind of left to our own devices out there. So we kind of, the only stipulation I had is you guys will shoot back HF comms to proof us back here. So we did HF comms from NTC back to Fort Campbell. And then at that, what it did is gave me time to recover from my knee surgery.
Yeah.
It's kind of like self-serving, but I got surgery.
You got to do what you got to do. You know?
Yeah, I got surgery during the World Cup of 2010. And that was right when everybody was on block leave. And then I had it removed, not repaired. So the recovery time was less.
Yeah.
And then when we came off block leave, started PTing, and then that's when they started going out to NTC and stuff. And then we were doing stuff in the back 40 of Campbell also as a company. I wanted to get not only platoon stuff in, but company in case whatever. So we did that, and then we were absorbing new guys at the same time.
Yeah. So
we were out actively recruiting. Come to the Pathfinder company.
Yeah. And
then you get guys in, and I let the platoon sergeants handle all the recruitment. Yeah. And I would just look at their enlisted record books, ERBs. Yeah. And and I let the platoon sergeants deal with all that stuff. And because we were also at that time getting officers in. Yeah. So we ended up getting 3 guys in. Got Runkle, Ryman, and Waldron. And you want to talk about 3 personalities that were totally just like this. So, Waldron came from Virginia Tech. Ryman came from Texas A&M, the Corps.
Of course, yeah.
Was a West Point graduate, but he was prior service. So, when you try to put lieutenants with opposite personalities for platoon sergeants.
Yeah.
So Runkle ended up going with Osmond. Ryman ended up going with second platoon with Poston, and Cato ended up getting Waldron in third platoon. So once that was established, I let them train on their own.
Yeah.
You know, we would go to the field and we would do a company air assault in, and I would give them this op order.
Yeah.
But me and the RTOs, we would go up on the building and we would just let them maneuver among themselves without my interference.
Yeah.
So that came along, and then, you know, then we left for Afghanistan in January and February of 2011.
Okay.
But we ended up splitting between two geographic locations. So Buller went down to Kandahar with Runkle's platoon with First Sergeant Sanchez and Pettit in the major part of the headquarters, supplying everything, because that was the port of entry and the airfield of entry and departure for us in and out of country for leave. So if we left down there, you know, you could leave your weapons down there with that part of the company.
Yeah.
All our supplies came in through Kandahar, and I took the two remaining platoons in a small slice of the headquarters element up to Bob Wolverine, which is right south of Kalat, Zabul
Okay.
province, south of Kalat. And we were there was no one in our area at all, except for the aviation task force I was with. And we ended up partnering with a Afghan battalion, which is right. I mean, you would leave our gate and go into their farm.
The Kandex.
Yeah.
Yep.
But they were an artillery unit. So, you know, but they were landowners. So we got there in 2011, and then we started operations. Kandahar started first, and we flowed into Wolverine, and then it started. So it was a hard deployment because we lost 6 Pathfinders in one day. So it was, you know, and there's always a point of contention because, you know, you talk about bad leaders. One thing I promised the guys that I wouldn't leave through deployment like their last commander did, and I would never assign anybody to another unit. You could attach them, but I would never sign them.
Yeah.
I wanted to maintain, as the commander, continuity for awards, evaluations, mentorship, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, they're your guys.
Right. So unfortunately, the squadron commander for 217 Cav was a guy named Lieutenant Colonel Riley. So he was a prior service guy from regiment that decided to become a commissioned officer and became an aviator. So when I pitched to the brigade commander with my task force commander, and Buller was there with our first sergeant and our sergeant major, how we're going to geographically split the company. You know, I gave the courses of action, and I said the best one that we can come up with that will support everybody is Buller in Kandahar and me with our parent task force. And there was a unit up in Tarankow, TK, which, you know, it didn't matter if you put a slice up there because they had Australian SAS, everybody up there.
Yeah.
So the flight time was negligible anyway. So it given them a platoon wouldn't have done anything.
Yeah.
And there was no battles, there was no infantrymen where we were down in Wolverine. So we needed that extra combat power. So we could rotate with doing infantry patrol and stuff and maintain an alert status with the other platoon for down aircraft recovery and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, you're having to provide your own security because you're the only grunts there. Yeah.
Correct. So the guys down in Kandahar were killing it. So they were attriting the insurgency of millions and millions of dollars. So people always think insurgencies run on people.
They run on money.
Runs on money because money buys weapons, ammunition, buys information, buys everything.
Yeah.
So Buller and his crew were down there in the Registan Desert, which south of Kandahar. So you got Kandahar, Spin Boldak, and then you got the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. You got the Reg Desert.
I was
So
at Spin on
yeah,
the trip.
yeah. So
Yeah.
just before we left, Riley sent his S3 over, Major Didier. And Didier was caught between a rock and a hard place. You know, he was a good guy, but he was under a taskmaster, which was Riley. Riley was not a
Power down to the lowest level guy.
you know, I like to say you can be a hands-on leader, but you got to get buy-in from everybody. And then you make the decision. And he was more of a dictator. You're going to, but he did it by threats. You're going to do this or else. So he sent Didier over, try to talk us into having Buller's team not attached, but assigned. And I'm like, absolutely not. He goes, well, I don't think my boss is going to like that. I'm like, you know what, sir? I said, I think you're a great major and a great S3. I don't give a fuck what your boss likes. They're mine. They're my men. Your colonel is not going to provide for my men. He wants to use them for the Riley sideshow. So anyway, that was this is me smiling because Jake Markham got a hold of me. He's an old guy. And I'll tell you about him too. So anyway, Buller was killing it down there with that team, with Runkle's team. They were wet opium presses, destroying, calling in. Just we were kind of spinning our wheels because it was still winter where we were at. We were out doing patrols, getting wet snow. So and when the winter changes, there's a dramatic shift.
Yeah, change fighting season. Yeah,
right. So the mountain passes, you know, it's kind of like that movie, The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. You're stuck here till the mountain passes, the snow melt. Snow melted, we started getting into business. So fast forward a couple months, both of us, you know, we're really successful at what we're doing. Runkle's team goes out. They find some guys on motorcycles. He radios in, and I'm like, kill them. You know, basically on the radio, you find them, you fix them, and you kill them. So he does that. Gets their you know, they were couriers with the campaign plan. We're like, bonus, boom, we get it translated. Fly that down to Kandahar, share it with the incoming guys, the Arctic Wolves. So we're doing our business. We're doing stuff. And then we were out doing something, and I come back and I get this call on the radio that they want me in the talk yesterday. So I go flying up there, and I've got I don't have it here, my green book, the Green Monster. My leader's book. And I go into the XO's office at that time was Major Hab. And he's on the phone, and I come in and he does this, you know, and I'm like, burp, and I see him writing, and 4 numbers click in my head. I look, and it's Tom Buller's last 4. And I'm like, what the fuck happened? Because right then, you know, everything, the pit of your stomach just starts gurgling, and you're like, it's, you know, my OCD, ADD mind starts rolling. I'm like, what's going on? Because I knew they were doing something. Because Tom sent me a brief message. Hey, we're going on a mission. I'm like, okay. So Hab gets off the phone. He goes, I don't have any details, but your guys got hit. And I'm like, I need to get to Kandahar. So God bless him and Colonel Albus. And I can't sing enough praises for Colonel Albus. Phenomenal guy. They put me on the medevac chase bird. So I go down and I grab my ruck that's already packed just in case something. And I get in this cheap ass piece of shit Toyota Hilux. And I'm grinding gears, and I'm talking to the detachment Sergeant Jimenez, Jesse. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but here's what I know. I said, I'm gonna give you, you know, I'm going down to Kandahar to find out. Camo blackout for the company. shut all the internet down, and I will call you as soon as I know.
Mhm.
And I said, on the threat of pain and death, if I find out anybody is calling back to their families, and because the rumor mill starts going,
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to kill them.
Yeah.
You know, so I go down there and I walk into this hospital, and you got to turn all your stuff in, and I'm body armor's going, you know, grenades on my chest rig are going in, and I walk down, and I'm like, I'm looking for somebody, and I can't find anybody. So I go down to where the incoming ER is, you know, the ER is. So I'm down there, and I see some people from the task force, 217 Pale Horse. And I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, man, it was bad. And I'm like, what the fuck was bad? So I'm getting bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Because no one knows, because they're pilots, they were flying.
Everybody's got little bits and pieces of information. We don't have a big picture yet.
Right. So, but I also know that there was no one in Pale Horse's talk when this was going on, because the 3 was flying, the XO was flying, and Riley was out flying.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what the fuck's going on? So anyway, I see 2 of my guys come in, Evans and McMillan. And I'm like, they're like, I'm like, what the fuck? So we go down the hallway, and they're telling me what's going on, what had happened. They flew in on the aircraft, I want to say, with Osmond. So, and I'm fucking getting livid as they're telling me this. And the doctor comes out, and this is something I'll remember till the day I die. The doctor comes out, and he comes up to me, and he goes, are you the commander? I said, I am. And he gives me Osmond's dog tags. And he's like, I'm sorry, he didn't make it. The PJs, I can't say enough about the PJs, because they were their low light fuel light came on as they were approaching Kandahar. That's how long they stayed out there.
Wow.
So what's that? So so, you know, when this happened, there's a rule that, you know, you got the hour, you know, the magic hour. So the magic hour isn't from time to pick up. The magic hour is from the time you get the call and the rotors start going.
Yeah.
So if you're outside of that magic hour, you're supposed to reposition medevac assets. So there were no medevac assets near Spin Boldak. In Spin Boldak, he didn't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what the fuck? So anyway, Osmond's dead. So they in the morgue's right behind there. So I'm starting to find out more of the story from Evans and McMillan, and I'm looking to kill this guy. So I go out there, and they're like, you need to identify the body. So I'm like, okay. So I get Sanchez. I'm like, dude, man, you need to come with me. This ain't going to be nice for me.
Yeah.
You know, so I go in there, and there's Osmond. And I'm like, yep, that's Osmond, because big guy, bench 400 pounds.
Yeah.
And there's one more body that they brought in with Osmond. And I'm like, I've got no clue who that is, because he took the IED blast.
Yeah.
Part of it. So I'm like, let me think on this. So I'm losing it. And I go outside, and the guy goes, he's got a Ranger tab. I'm like, it's Osmond. I mean, it's Runkle. It's John Runkle. And he's like, okay, well, we're gonna get his ISO prep card and make sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm like, I'm livid.
It was an IED blast is what hit them, or because
so what happened was they were out. So Riley was out flying around in his OH-58, and he sees this fucking trailer covered in a blue tarp. He's like, and it's right across the PAC border.
Yeah.
But it's too close to the PAC border where you can't drop a bomb on it.
Yeah.
So he sees this, and he wants an action, because he was flying around with some higher ranking guy from what the story goes. So anyway, he goes back, and Buller's guys were just coming off reverse cycle, doing nighttime stuff. So Buller gets the mission, and he's like, I don't feel good about this. And Riley's like, you'll do it or else, So Buller's like, okay. So he goes and gets the 2 EOD guys, Hamsky and Soulsby, and he gets some A&A guys with them. So they go back and they do their quick mission planning, that, and they were proofing the lane. So the 2 EOD guys were proofing the lane with Eddie Mills and the Afghans. And then the last thing that happened was, so they go to Spin Boldak, and Buller told Runkle, I'm going in. You stay here. I've got a bad feeling about this.
Yeah.
So, and it's nothing against Runkle, but it goes back to that experience thing. This is Runkle's first deployment as an infantry officer. This is Buller's second time in Afghanistan back to back.
Yeah.
So Buller goes down there. He gets the first flight in, and he's got his. You got to understand Buller. He's got thighs like that. He's a stout farm kid from Indiana. And the last thing he hears from Mills is, "Hey, boss, there's something on the ground." And boom.
Oh shit.
So there goes the 2 EOD guys, the Afghani guys, Eddie Mills.
Yeah.
Buller takes shit in his knee, and he got something in his throat, but he didn't know at the time. Yeah. So anyway, he's got to put 2 tourniquets on his leg. Yeah. That's how, so he goes and he proofs, and it is a end of mission. I forgot what we call it, but it's a mass cash. We're done. Yeah. So he goes back and he fucking reproofs the lane back to the HLZ. And Tom Kai, whose name will come up later, landed it. Now it's a Kazovac. They fucking throw Buller on because Tom had saw the explosion, landed. They get Buller on the aircraft. Riley's already on his way to Spin Boldak to get the rest of the people. So they pass like this in the air. Spin Boldak didn't know Buller was coming. He's pounding on the door. He's like, hey, I'm bleeding to death. Yeah. So they get him somehow from Spin Boldak back to Kandahar. And he was being prepped, or he was already in the OR when I had shown up. Yeah. So now, so then Runkle lands with Osman and the rest of the guys. So, and then the second IED explosion goes off.
Well, there's 2.
Yeah, so there's 2. So the second IED goes off and it kills the rest of the guys in the company. And so they, it's like, what the hell? So the time lapse between, if you compress the time, it would be a matter of probably 1.5, 2 minutes where they were all killed. Yeah. So Runkle and Osman's bodies are there. And Albus was already flying down with our Sergeant Major Gibson. So I'm breaking down because, people don't realize this isn't like just a platoon sergeant and a lieutenant to me. These are guys that I've trained with, had dinner with, had drinks with, got to know them. Osman was a prior service Marine like me. I was the kind of commander that when we talked, it was no rank. I would just sit back with some Copenhagen in on the range and we shoot the shit, and they're like, well, that private, I'm like, he's a private. You got to mentor him. He's going to do stupid shit like we did when we were privates, cut him some slack, so the rest of the bodies come in. So I go in there and I see the rest of them. I see I shouldn't say the rest of them. I see 3 more I can identify. Ramos, Bohal, and Patton. And then I get to the last body bag and I'm like, well, let's do this one. It wasn't that term, but I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And they're like, yeah, we're not there's nothing. I'm like, and they're like, that's Eddie Mills. And I'm like, well, and they're like, sir, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Because he took the full blast, the brunt.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. And I'm starting to, now my mind's starting to spin. What are we going to do? So I walk out from the morgue and I'm going up to the hospital, the roll 3. And I'm fucking livid. I'm seeing red, but I see the colonel's there with the sergeant major and all the guys that were down there.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, here's what we're going to do. And I said, all you are going to go back and you're going to stand down. There's no more missions. I said, I'm going to get a team down here from Canada, from where we are, from Wolverine. They're going to replace you. And I said, and they're like, I'm like, you do not want to go in there. And that is not what you want to remember your friends by, from what I saw. That is not what you want to remember for the rest of your life. So, and I said, you guys go. I need to talk to the NCOs here. So they left and I said, okay, here's the deal. We need to start inventorying their stuff and accounting for sensitive items.
Yeah.
And I said, as you're going through their personal stuff, if you were a parent and you would be embarrassed or upset or frustrated by something that you got, throw it away.
Yeah.
So they went back and they started doing their stuff. And I said, I'll take care of Buller's stuff. I said, I'll catch up to you guys in a little bit, because Buller was out of the OR. He was in recovery.
Yeah.
We walked in and Tom's all, his legs all bandaged. He's got tubes coming out of him, and he's conscious, but he's still, he's on pain medicine. And we're, I walk in and I'm like, man, how are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, my leg hurts. I'm like, they had to go in there and remove some shit from your leg.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. And he's like, he looked at me, and I'll remember this again till the day I die. He goes, how many? I said 6. He goes, all of them? I said, yes. And he goes, I'm sorry. And I'm like, it is not your fault.
Yeah.
So I said, it's not your fault. So we talked, and he was being medevaced. He was going to go, up to Kabul, to Germany, and back home. Yeah. So we tried keeping him for the ramp ceremony, but it didn't work out. So I go back and I'm going, I'm staying down there for a couple of days. And Cato ended up bringing his guys down to take over the mission down there. There was no more patrolling. It was just down aircraft, down pilot recovery stuff. We inventoried all their stuff, and then the real inventoriers came over. I guess it can't be from the company. So they brought other lieutenants over, whomever. And I said, okay, so they went through that. And then now I'm faced with a dilemma, because I've lost a platoon leader, a platoon sergeant, a squad leader, a team leader, an RTO, and a medic.
Yeah.
Out of one platoon.
That's a lot.
Right. So how do we, as a company, fix this? How do we keep this going without this whole thing fracturing on us? How do we keep unit cohesiveness? How do we keep the mission set? How do we get back to focused on what we do? So what ended up happening was we stayed for the ramp ceremony. So once the ramp ceremony was done, and we went back, and I went into the bay where the platoon was, and I said, hey, gather around, and I never wore a top, and I popped in some Copenhagen. I said, you guys, we need to have a discussion. Yeah. I said, you need a new platoon sergeant. And I said, here's your choices. And they're like, well, I'm like, this is a discussion you guys need to have when I'm not here. This is amongst you guys. I said, you've got 2 choices. Then I said, I'll give you about 15 minutes I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go start. I'm a big history reader. I said, I'm going to go read my book.
Mm-hmm.
You're done. Somebody come out and talk to me. There were 3 choices, but the one guy's like, I just got promoted. The staff sergeant, ain't happening.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
super.
So we had 2 guys, Thompson and Cook. So Cook had just gotten off the trail. He was the ops NCO, and Thompson was on another deployment. So I go out and I'm out there reading my book, and they came out and they said, oh, the 2 NCOs came out and they're like, hey, we've decided on Donald Thompson. I said, okay, let's go back. So I walked in there and I said, are you guys absolutely positively sure Thompson's who you want? And I said, I'm not trying to change your mind. I just want to make sure this is what you want, because I'm going to go next door and make a phone call. And they're like, yes. I said, you're getting Ryman also. And they're like, okay. So I walked next door, popped a rip it, drank a rip it, got on the phone, and I got a hold of the company CP at Wolverine. I'm like, go get Ryman, go get Thompson, and go get Sergeant Jimenez. Put him in my office and tell him to get on speakerphone and call me. So, 15 minutes later, I get the call and I said, Thompson and Ryman, pack your stuff. What you need, we'll get the rest of your stuff down to you. What you need to sustain yourself, Thompson, you're coming down here and being a platoon sergeant. Ryman, you're coming down to be the PL and detachment commander down here. So they came down, and then we all I ended up going back up to Wolverine with that team for the ceremony we're having at Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
So, this happened on May 26th of 2011, day before Memorial Day. So I'm not a big religious guy,
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere between all my deployments and stuff, I kind of lost my faith.
Yeah.
But at that time, when we're up there, we're getting ready to do this memorial ceremony. The night before, because I told Ryman and Thompson to hold still till the ramp ceremony. So, the memorial at Wolverine, because they were going to miss both. So we went up there, back up to Wolverine, and the night before, a medevac Blackhawk over-torqued its engine up by Fob Balo.
Yeah.
So it can't fly. So I send Ryman and his guys up there, and they go pull security, and we're talking on the radio. And then the next day, 2 Australian 47s go up there to recover the Blackhawk. Well, you got to take the engines out. So they get the forklift out, they take the engines out, boom, bang. Engines are in one Blackhawk and, one Chinook, and they sling load the Blackhawk under the 47. And we're standing out there in a formation because we're going to go into this ceremony, and we see this 47 coming in. And all of a sudden we got a down aircraft because the load in the other 47 shifted and it crashed.
Oh shit.
So, yeah. So we hop on the Blackhawks, and it was me and the team that came up from Kandahar, and we fly out there, and I get off the aircraft and I meet Ryman, we're bringing water and stuff. And I knew we would be okay because these guys had it. The team from Wolverine hadn't seen the guys from Kandahar in months.
Yeah.
So they were out there high-fiving, hugging, slapping, pairing up in defensive positions and stuff. So I knew right then the company would be okay.
Yeah.
So, we ended up coming back from that mission, doing our ramp ceremonies, our memorial ceremonies at Wolverine and Kandahar, and we just kept rolling.
How long was this into your tour? Oh
my God, 3 months maybe.
Oh wow, that was fairly early in the tour.
That was fairly early. So we didn't become risk averse. We just carried on. But it shook some people.
Yeah.
So, it was hard, and there's a quote by this Colonel Downs. He was the colonel up at Quezon during the siege. He was a Marine. And he, basically it's like, if you think losses don't hurt and bother a commander, you're wrong. It stays with him for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So, and Buller ended up getting emergency surgery because he had something, but he's back at the States, and recovering. So we ended up finishing in that tour. And there was always friction between me and Colonel Riley after that.
Yeah,
there was more.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Can we just pause for just 1 second?
Sure. So I left, he was trying to bully Ryman, and Ryman's a good lieutenant, so Ryman calls me and he's like, hey, so I'm like, I'll be down there. So I went down there, and Riley and I had a few words, and the sergeant major had to come in. His sergeant major had to come in and get between us. And then when it came to end of tour awards, the team down there didn't want him there.
Yeah.
So I'm like, fine. So it was Colonel Albus who came down and presented them all with their end of tour awards, and Riley was pissed. I'm like, I don't really care.
Yeah.
So, but I can't, you talk about good leaders and bad leaders.
Yeah.
You've got Riley on one end of the spectrum, and you've got Colonel Albus on the other.
Yeah.
Albus was a prior enlisted guy in the 82nd, Ranger, everything. Got out, went to school for 4 years, came back in as an aviator.
Yeah.
So, but he is the commander that I learned empathy from.
Yeah.
Such a nice guy, but he was always empathetic to what we did. He was always cognizant of how dangerous the job was. Cognizant of, we've got specialists out there doing the job of staff sergeants.
Yeah.
So we ended up taking a battle position out there and putting a hurting on the insurgency in our area. And then end of tour came up, and we got replaced by the guys from the 25th who were provisional. It was like a Brunswick Stew Pathfinder company.
Yeah.
So we ended up leaving, going back to Campbell, and then we got back. I think I got back February.
Yeah.
12, and then I had to do some job finding.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't stay in the division.
So you've been there a long time.
Yeah. So I ended up going to, I shouldn't say going, I was on orders to go teach at Marion Military Academy in Georgia. So I changed command on June 6th, 2012. Yeah. And then I never got the Marion Military Academy.
Made it. That's never got that.
Never made it. I got a phone call. And I got a phone call from my friend who I taught at Herlick, who was now working down at RTB. He's like, hey, you're going to be the new RSLC commander. And I'm like, dude, seriously? Yeah. He's like, yeah. And I said, okay. And we're talking. And it was an on the phone interview, and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
So I said, I got two questions for you. And Gary's like, what? I said, am I going back on free fall status? He's like, yes. And I'm like, do I get to walk patrols? He goes, man, you're the commander. You can walk as many patrols as you want. I said, fair enough. So no one told Marion Military Academy that I wasn't coming. So I got this email of this guy saying I was absent without leave. I didn't report into my duty assignment. And I wrote him an email back.
It's like, hey, dude, I'm a commander down at RTB.
And he's like, that is the most unprofessional thing, Bob. And I'm like, sir, I'm just doing what my assignments manager tells me to do.
Hey, a side note on the free fall stuff. When did you get free fall qualified?
2003, 2004, somewhere around there.
Pardon?
2003, 2004.
Were you at were you at RTB?
I was in, so I got, yeah, I was an RSLC. I was an instructor.
Okay,
That's,
cool.
yeah, at that time it was part of the, you needed free fall guys because when you went to like the 82nd,
Yeah.
in the core units, they had free fall guys, and if you were doing external evaluations, you had to jump with them.
Yeah, that makes sense because those guys were able to maintain a free fall capability.
Yep. So I ended up going down to RTB. And it was probably the worst assignment I've ever had in my life.
Yeah,
Both officer and enlisted. It was friggin' horrible.
Well, you were down there at a bad time too. That's
absolutely.
I mean,
so it was
the armor school. Just for our listeners, correct me if I'm wrong. At that time, the armor school was moving to Benning, and they were trying to merge infantry and armor. And
correct.
Yeah.
So at that time, General McMaster's was the commander of the Maneuver Center of Excellence.
Yeah.
So, and I, again, I was just a company commander, but due to the reshuffling and reorganization, which now has been completely undone, RTB gave up Delta Company. Now, for the audience, Delta Company had been in RTB since 1986, and it was a habitual relationship due to the LRPs from Vietnam and LRS. So they, powers of be figured in 1986, we need to open LRSLIC to maintain that doctrinal knowledge.
Yeah.
Of long range surveillance. So now you're going from, I don't know. So 86, 96, 2006. So that's 26. You're going 26 years of habitual POI relationship to a unit that has no clue about dismounted stuff.
Did they make you move locations? Because Delta Company was right there outside 4th RTB.
So Delta Company moved before I got there. So they were down the road past the RTB medics, and it was the first. So when I went to Ranger School, there was a mini CIF down there.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
same road.
You came down the hill, and it was off to the left-hand side as you're going. Yeah.
Yep. So it was a compound that we shared with the 75th. It wasn't RIP anymore. It was their, and I still call it Ranger Indoctrination Program, but it was, you're going to go try out. If you want to go in regiment, you got to go here and do all their stuff. Yeah. So we shared the same compound with them. So I get down there, and the writing was on the wall that we were moving to the Cavalry Brigade, the 316th Cavalry Brigade, but we were going to go under the 316th Cavalry Squadron. And I'm like, shit. I'm like, this is going to be horrible. So anyway, I get down there, and I assume command, and we're still going. We're still doing the POI stuff, but we ended up going in 2013. Yeah, 2013. We shifted to the cavalry. So we got to maintain the beret, airborne status, and everything. But now you got everybody in that unit. Oh my God, I'm airborne qualified. I'm going to go in jump status. I'm like, oh God, what the hell? So, but what screwed us in the long run is RTB kept the equipment that we gained through student contact hours. So, like medics, we were no longer allowed to use the RTB medics. Yeah, we lost like any support that RTB was that we got through student contact hours. It just dissipated. We were like the redheaded stepchild down the road. Yeah,
Cav didn't really want you there.
Right. So, you're going into a hostile country. So, you know, like the boats we were supposed to get for, you know, jumping on Friar, you got to have boats,
Mhm.
you know, so we, and then, but it wasn't the only shuffling that was going on. So I forgot what infantry battalion used to, like the 198th was the support, I think. That one,
Was it 197th Infantry Brigade? It was
yeah.
something like that.
So they dissolved, they ended up getting absorbed into the cavalry also.
Yeah.
So now we had to compete for medic support. So it was just horrible. Now you're dealing with people that one want your school to go away because now it interferes with their school, the ARC, the Armor Reconnaissance Course.
Yeah.
So but they're just two distinct separate schools.
Yeah. They're
I
two
had
different. They're two different
to,
types of reconnaissance.
right. I had to sit there and go look at both POIs, and there was a site that I forgot what it was, but it showed like what was the 150 I think was the new radio out. You know, how to install, load, and put in operation a 150. Well, both courses did it, but we could use it for HF. The CAV couldn't do it. So
Yeah.
I had to justify the course by each thing we did. So it was separate and unique from the cavalry stuff
Mhm.
because they wanted that course to slowly rot and die because they wanted to be the proponent agency for reconnaissance.
Yeah.
But every unit does combat engineers do reconnaissance.
Yeah.
Aviators do aerial reconnaissance. So we ended up maintaining the company, maintaining the POI, fighting for existence against Colonel Hayes, who was the cavalry squadron commander, who was just, he was on the level. And when I talk about bad commanders I've had, you got Billingsley and Hayes.
Yeah.
So, and then I would also toss in, you know, RTB, they were stuck between a rock and a hard place because it was coming down from its CG, but yet they didn't have to abandon us right away. They were like, inshallah, hands off, boom. As soon as that day one hit, they were like, you're not our problem. We've just absorbed the airborne school. We now, you know, and so we were left to our own devices. So land wasn't getting requested through them, you know, airborne. So we would have to do our own POI resourcing.
Yeah.
So, you know, but the good thing is we never had to support Best Ranger after that.
Yeah.
So it was just a horrible, the only saving grace out of that whole place would be Colonel Davidson, who was the brigade commander, and Lieutenant Colonel Mills, who came over from RTB and was the brigade XO when he was a lieutenant colonel. So, you know, that is where I found out how much commanders backstab people.
Yeah.
So I ended up being placed under investigation. I had a 15-6 going against me, and I received absolutely zero support from the squadron commander of the sergeant major. So, and it was over a set of lost nods.
Well, the higher up you go, the more loyalty just go. It seems like loyalty ebbs and flows away, and I'll say this: it's at a certain point in both the enlisted side, the officer side, it's like lobotomies are conducted just to get that rank.
Well, I think a lot of it also is, you know, you're a lieutenant colonel. You're gonna, if you make the rank of lieutenant colonel, you know, there's nothing in any Army manual, anything that says what a successful career is. A successful career is 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't matter if you're a sergeant first class or a lieutenant colonel. You know, if you attain the rank of lieutenant colonel, you've had a successful career. You're going to read, if you come in as a second lieutenant.
Yeah.
Unlike, you know, we're not talking prior service guys.
Yeah.
So once you're a lieutenant colonel, you start seeing eagles. You start seeing stars. you know, and I think they get in that, and, you know, not this, what I'm about to say doesn't apply to everybody in TRADOC. But if you go to TRADOC and you're a battalion commander, that's it. You're not a force comm commander.
You're not going to get a maneuver unit.
Right. And everybody, so, you know, it's people go to TRADOC to die. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
So, you know, and you got some phenomenal people in TRADOC, don't get me wrong. But unfortunately, the guys I ran into when we went to the cavalry side were not phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, so I ended up going under this 15-6 because of a, you know, when you cut through the skin back the onion, you cut through all the bullshit. It was over a pair of lost nods that when they did the Walker changeover, instead of physically touching nods, they counted bags. So I went and you know, the company was locked down on the camp by order of not me, the higher. You will remain there until the equipment is found. So I got my marching orders, and then phone calls started rolling in from wives to the brigade commander. Once you get the wives involved, it's over. So
yeah,
and Hayes did this. So I was out walking. I was out. We were in class. I was out doing stuff, and I roll back in, and I get this phone call. It's at fucking night. It's dark outside. Come to my office. So I go over there, and he says, you are hereby, an administrative move, not a punitive move. You are being removed from command pending a 15-6. I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah. So I get escorted all the way back to my goddamn office.
Yeah.
And I got to clear out my shit at fucking 1800 at night. So
that's not how like, get back the nods. That's for damn sure.
Right. So I leave, and you know, I'm talking to the guy that escorted me is a phenomenal guy. So anyway, I go and I'm like, what the hell am I going to do now? You know, so I go and I am now up at the Brigade 3 shop, spinning my wheels because this 15-6. And there's, now that I'm retired, I could say it. There's more to the story behind it because the guy, the squadron commander was gunning for my first sergeant at Doug Clark, you know. So he was mad because I would not give Doug Clark a relief for cause.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have no proof that Doug Clark got a DUI. There's no blotter. There's nothing. There's no police report. There's nothing. All it says, and it was the RTB sergeant major telling our squadron sergeant major, hey, you need to look on page 8 of the Ledger Inquirer because one of your guys is in there. I'm like, what a backstabbing.
Well, so anyway, why would you screw over a fellow?
Well, and again, it's 2 sergeant majors. So I refuse to write Doug Clark a relief for cause because I rate Dougie on his performance, which was all excellence blocks.
Yeah.
You, as squadron commander, got to rate him on his potential. And something in the reg says the person that's initiating the relief for cause or the administrative removal has to attach something to that NCOER.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. It's not my job. So that was another butt heads because I was overly protective and very protective of my guys. Yeah. So anyway, I spin my wheels in the 3 shop, and then I've got to go see the 15-6 officer. There's like 18 fucking specifications against me, and I'm like, what? One was fraud, waste, and abuse of government vehicles, fraud, waste, and abuse of government money when we went to Fort Riley for an MTT, because the NCOs decided to take the friggin' GSAs and go to the strip club. And I'm like, I did a commander's inquiry on all that, and I had all this paperwork saved. So anyway, I go see the 15-6 officer, who's some fat disgruntled major. And, you know, I walk in and I'm like, hey, sir, what's up? He's like, hey, have a seat. And he reads me all the rights and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, hey, let's get this over. He goes, you're charged with, and we're going to, I think it was more like 12 specifications. I got it someplace in here.
Yeah.
12 specifications of boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, do you want to, I said, you know what, sir? I said, I think I'm going to go talk to a lawyer.
Yeah.
He's like, if you go talk to a lawyer, this is going to go worse. And I'm like, dude.
Yeah, I'm going to go talk to a lawyer.
I'm like, I'm out here. So I got up and left. So I fought this 15-6 and I went to JAG and I carried that green book with me and I was writing notes the whole time. I talked to a civilian lawyer and I was writing notes. And then I ended up doing my rebuttal, but I was hamstrung on my rebuttal because the squadron commander would not give me the climate command surveys, command climate surveys.
Yeah.
Because for somehow it went from phenomenal to bad. And I'm like, well, they go in my rebuttal. So he wouldn't give me the redacted counseling statement. So I ended up having to do I went to IG and got them. And my rebuttal was like 72 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
I turned it in to Colonel Dave. And what I turned, I was due for my OER. And people got to remember at that time, in the beginning of 2014, the Army was cutting people left and right.
Oh yeah.
So if you had any negative, if you were a prior service officer and you had negative stuff in your file from enlisted, they were booting people.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, hell no, dude. So he pulled me in and I'm like, I'm not signing that OER. He's like, well, you have to sign it. I'm like, I don't have to sign it because I'm in the rebuttal process of this 15-6. It's not complete. I can't sign that until the
15-6 rebuttal's done.
Right. And so he's like, well, okay, you got anything to say? And I looked at him and I said, sir, I said, out of my X amount of years in the military, you're the worst fucking commander I've ever had. And he's like, why? I said, you sat there and you watched me get rolled under the bus by your squadron commander and you did nothing. You knew exactly what was going on. I said, there's no goddamn way I'm under 12 specifications in this 15-6. And I said, you suck. And I left. So, but he went home that night and he talked to his wife because it bothered him so much.
Yeah.
And I went into the office. He called me up the next day and he sat me in his office and he talked to me and he's like, and he explained it bothered him. He talked to his wife and he goes, okay, I got your point of view. He goes, you do what you got to do. And so I did my rebuttal and I turned it in on President's Day weekend. I came back after that 4-day. He called me up to his office and he goes, it's taken care of. It just disappeared. I was guilty of one thing.
Yeah.
Driving a GSA to the goddamn shopette to get a blue slushie before a command and staff meeting. That was it. And I'm like, but your squadron commander does it every day.
Yeah.
So I ended up staying up there to be his air guy.
Yeah.
And the plans guy. But I stayed on status until I left. And the awesome thing I got to do was kick everybody off from being double slotted and paid parachute positions.
Yeah.
Like ARC guys, airborne operations aren't in their POI out of here. So I was, unfortunately, Davidson left. And then we ended up getting another brigade commander in, and he was the assistant to the vice chief of staff of the Army.
Oh.
And this guy was, I thought Hayes was bad. This guy was horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. So I got on the phone and I called Branch and I'm like, hey, get me out of here. And luckily my assignments manager, we served together in Iraq as lieutenants.
Yeah.
First tour. So I ended up going to teach ROTC at Appalachian State. And when I left there, when I left Benning, I never looked back. But the pain continued for the real commander that took after, a guy named Cam Jordan.
Yeah.
So while I was serving in purgatory in the 3 shop,
yeah,
the guy this fucking guy. Josh Geis was my XO. Josh Geis gave the brigade commander's BlackBerry number to his wife. And that started the whole thing.
Yeah.
But the sad thing is, Geis spent more time on my couch in my apartment in Columbus, keeping him out of trouble from domestic violence with his Italian wife.
Oh, God.
So anyway, but in 2014, when I was still there, that's when the first meeting the LRA became.
Yeah.
It was just a meeting. It was during Best Ranger, I think. And we met up on Airport Thruway. I think it's a DoubleTree now. So it was me, Sean McCartney, Brian Holbrook, Marshall Huckabee, and a bunch of other people. I think we had maybe 30 guys, maybe.
Yeah.
It was the first, it was an unofficial thing.
Yeah.
So that's when.
And LRA's, we're over 2,000 members now? Is it?
Yeah, well, yeah. So we have, but when you talk about dues paying, it's not that much.
Yeah.
So in the thing is, we're kind of going to be like the Doolittle Raiders.
Yeah.
If the younger global war and terrorism guys don't come in, we're going to be the last guys.
Yeah.
When we die, it's going to go away. So, and then I end up going to App State. So but the problems of RSLC still followed me up there. So, and they wanted that course to die so bad that the new brigade commander threatened Cam to chapter, like Jake Markham. I told you I got a text from Jake Markham.
Yeah.
Jake Markham, Spin Boldak. He was in F Company. Purple Heart, got caught around in the back.
Yeah.
And had some other issues that he told me about and I was fully aware of.
Yeah.
So he was driving back from Missouri back to Benning, and his back started seizing on him. So he took one of his wife's back muscle relaxers, which unfortunately made him hop out on a piss test.
Yeah.
So the brigade commander told Cam that you will chapter this guy and not leave him a pot to piss in. So Cam and I talked, and I'm like, you need to go to IG, you need to go to JAG, cover your bases, write it all down. So I talked to Jake, and I'm like, dude, you need to fight this. So another day that'll stick in my mind, I'm getting my household, I'm getting my household goods settled in there, and I had my computer, its desk set up, and Markham wanted me to be a witness or testify, whatever, on his behalf.
Yeah.
I'm like, absolutely, dude. So I'm sitting there on the phone, drinking a beer, talking to his lawyer, and it was Markham, his lawyer, the brigade commander, the brigade sergeant, and somebody else in there. And the guy, first question goes, when were you here? And I told him. And I said, when RSLC went over, and I said, I just left like a month ago. He goes, how was this place? I said, I've been in the military since 1988. This is by far, hands down, the worst fucking command climate I've ever been in.
Wow.
And he's like, why? And I just went to town.
Yeah.
Went to town on him.
Yeah.
So luckily Markham got to retire. So, nothing happened. And it was, the guy was gunning for him and they wanted the course to die. But now it's back under RTB.
Yeah.
Back where it's down the road from where RTB is, not towards the medics, but further down the road where that old Oconus replacement used to be.
I can't remember.
Yeah, so it's down there now, and it's called Camp Cornet after Lance Cornet.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so then I went to App State and I was assistant professor of military science, and it's a hidden gem to be an ROTC instructor after I think almost 54 months of company command. Straight.
Yeah, that's a lot of company command.
So, it was an interesting career. And then the LRA, I started to get active in the LRA. And then I taught at App State for about 4 years, and then I was offered, I could have stayed in, but I had Riley, Bliss, or Hood as my three choices.
Yeah,
I was
I wouldn't want to go to Hood, and I wouldn't
at
want
that time I was still married. But
Yeah,
she when I moved to Benning and App State up in Boone, she didn't come. She
yeah,
wasn't, because she was settled into Clarksville, and our son was going to Clarksville Academy. And we were on the downside of the marriage anyway.
yeah.
The only thing that kept it was deployments.
Mhm.
So when I got up to App State, it kind of imploded. So she filed for divorce again. One of the, it was a game to her. So anyway, signed the paper, sent them back, and then I had 2 hip repairs at the time, and I knew I wasn't good, I wasn't going back to the 101st to be near my son.
Yeah,
Hood, Riley, or Bliss was my choices, and I was already selected to go to ILE, and I declined it.
yeah,
I'm like, and then I was offered non-infantry positions. I could have went to be like, I can't be the XO at the airborne school because I can't jump anymore.
no, yeah,
I had bad hips.
yeah,
So, you know, at that time, I met my present girlfriend.
yeah,
So we talked about it, and I'm like, she's like, hey, whatever you decide. And I sat and I did so. And the funny thing is, I was teaching with this guy named Tom Kai,
yeah,
who rescued Tom Buller,
yeah.
and we became best friends up there. Now he got out. He resigned his commission. He's up in New York, phenomenal dude. And I talked to Tom, and because I went out for a run one day, and I'm like, I'm not feeling this anymore.
Yeah,
And he said, give it some time. When you start getting this feeling after a couple weeks, it's probably time to go.
yeah,
So I walked into my boss's office one day, who was he was a lieutenant colonel, and I was a major.
Mhm.
And I'm like, sir, I quit. It's like, what? I said, no, I'm retiring.
Yeah,
He's like, how long you got in? And I said, it'll be almost 30 years. He goes, what's wrong? And I told him, Hood,
yeah,
Riley, or Bliss. And he's like, and I said, I'm never gonna be. All I wanted to go back, and I wanted to be an S3 on
mhm.
Fort Campbell in an
Yeah,
infantry battalion. That was it.
yeah,
Um, so he's like, you do what you got to do. Once you figure it out, let me know. So I went back to my office, and I sent the 4187 up to my first 07 in the chain of command,
Mhm.
skip brigade, because they're not involved. And
Yeah,
I called down, I sent a letter, an email to the guys, because I was going to do the satellite program. I was going to go to Fort Gordon for 6 months, and the rest was going to be online.
yeah,
So I called the guys down at whoever it was, and I said, hey, I told them who I was. I said, I'm declining ILE. Please give my slot in space to somebody else. And they were, oh, thank you so much. And
yeah,
then I walked back in, and I said, I declined ILE, and I've sent my 4187. I said, sir, I'm done. I said,
yeah,
it is what it is. So I did the rest of the time at App State,
yeah,
and I worked with some phenomenal people up there that, I would say, if it wasn't for App State, because I was still harboring a lot of hatred
hmm.
for what happened in Afghanistan. So,
It takes, as a warrior, we accumulate wounds that no one ever sees. And I myself, I went through a period of just hatred, anger, and discontent and depression myself.
and this had been festering for quite a while.
Yeah,
I would say, the divorce didn't have anything to do with me retiring. It
yeah,
was like, you know, but how the world works, and how fate, So like my current girlfriend, we've been together for 8 years. I met her in 1990.
Yeah.
We were stranded in BWI together when I was a young Marine. So I went to Desert Storm, Desert Shield with the Marine Corps. She had just graduated from UGA. I came back, she was doing her master's here at VCU, and we just kind of, there was no social media. We just kind of drifted. She moved to Florida. I moved to Charlotte, and our paths kind of paralleled. She got married to Steve, have two beautiful kids, Ben and Sophia. I got married, had a son, and then Steve passed of cancer, and she moved back up to Richmond. Her dad passes, almost same thing. I was going through that very ugly divorce because she was a money grubbing, all about social status. And
next time we get to sit and talk about beer, drink a beer together, we'll compare divorces.
We ended up reconnecting.
Well,
And this is
that's
why,
great.
yeah. So, I think if I had a do-over, the only thing I would not do is when I retired, and the problem is with the Army, and it's ingrained into you. It's institutionalized into you that you must work. So I retired the end of April 2018. I was on a plane a month later to go back to Afghanistan as an advisor. So, and it was, it was a poor decision.
Yeah.
So, but I went over there and I worked with I was one of 2 Americans on the team.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal. So I wasn't an advisor like to SF. I didn't even carry a weapon.
You
I
were
was
an
an advisor.
You were
What's
an
that?
MOD building, weren't you?
So I was at the Ministry of Defense.
Yeah.
So we lived on the new Kabul compound, KC, which if you got up on the second story of the stacked housing units, I could see out to the airport, Harman Kazai International. They probably renamed it now. But we were a 10-15 minute drive from the embassy.
Yeah.
So and what we were trying to do was bring the Afghans and kind of put them into a TRADOC method of training.
Yeah.
One basic training, outstation unit training, because what happened is each corps commander had their little.
Everybody they were warlords.
Right. And no one was ever trained the same.
Yeah. The training it was hard to be standardized with them. It was very hard.
Right. So, but we, looking back, we were just some pushy assholes because we wanted the Afghans to do the MDMP process.
Yeah.
But yet, and we wanted them to make their own decisions. But yet, when we wanted something done, we wanted them to totally ignore everything we tried training them. And they'd be like, but yeah, this is. So I forgot who the general was at the time. She came up with this horrible idea that, if they don't do this, we'll just withhold the money. Yeah. And I'm like, this makes no sense. You're not dealing with a child here.
Yeah.
And the problem is when you get to that level, and she was never a combatant commander, and when I talk about combatant commanders, I'm talking about landowners that actually went and sat and talked to their Afghan allies, like Albus and Colonel Royer, our brigade commander. They would sit in the shuras and they would listen. And the guy I worked with was a lieutenant colonel in the Afghan army, Lieutenant Colonel Hotek, who was actually the XO. But you got to understand their culture.
Yeah.
And it was tribal. And they didn't care what the government in Kabul did. They, you could live 2 miles from the nearest village and you would never see those guys your whole life. Yeah. So, but she thought the smart way would be withhold the money and support. I'm like, that's not how Afghanistan works.
No.
Afghanistan is literally, and whoever said it, the graveyard of empires. It's the common enemy for the Afghanis is whoever is in that country that's not an Afghan.
Yeah. I always thought they ought to go back to kind of like the what was it, the Jirga, the tribal,
Yeah,
basically a confederation of tribes, because that's really what they were.
kind of like our colonies before. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and the sad thing is, I'm not a really political guy,
Mhm.
but the sad thing is, we gave them every chance, but we also hamstrung them at the same time.
All
So, I'm a big history guy, and I look at the withdrawal from Afghanistan much like I look at the withdrawal from Vietnam. You know, we when we left, it was in the when we left Afghanistan, it was in the dark of night.
yeah, we left in a lurch. Just left them in a lurch.
It was never, and whoever, and there's never been an accountability of Milley, the Joint Chiefs, Biden, Austin, of how we left.
No.
And if it was me, a captain, I would be hung
Relieved.
from the yardarm at the Navy Yard in DC.
Yeah.
But we left those people to die.
Yep.
We left that country to go back to the dark ages under Taliban. And did we need to keep massive forces there? No. But what we should have kept was the SF guys there.
Yeah.
And kept the embassy open and kept air support for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure you had friends too. I had Afghan. They were literally doing Zoom calls with Afghan Air Force guys, trying to help them keep their aircraft going so they could keep providing CASEVAC, resupply, close air support. Honestly, I get so wound up about this, about the way we left and the way it was done. I think there's a lot of people should be in prison.
And everybody's like, well, the last president had an agreement. He did. We needed to leave eventually, but not the way we did.
No.
So, if you look back and you look at 1975, when the North Vietnamese started steamrolling through South Vietnam, when we pulled our combat troops out in 73, we still promised that we would supply munitions and air support.
Yep.
So when 75 happened and that started, that northern wave started coming south, the current president, we have no moral obligation to support our allies. And a leopard never changes spots. He did the same thing to our Afghan allies. So luckily, I've just reconnected with my interpreter. He lives in Louisville. So when I was a contractor, so I think I'm gonna see him on the way back from the rally in Branson. But he was one of the lucky ones that got out, because Dad was part of the defense attaché in India for and when Sammy was visiting Mom and Dad in India when the country fell. Yeah. So now they're without a country. Now Mom and Dad live in England, and he lives in actually Louisville.
Yeah.
Kentucky. So, it is what it is. In my 30 years, almost 30 years, I seen a lot of stuff that would make people puke. But, I've lived a blessed career. I had a blessed career in it. I was taking some notes. So, you talk about leadership, leadership is a top-down thing, not a bottom-up. It's got to go both ways. It's a two-way street.
Be loyalty. Loyalty goes both ways.
I think the foundation where I learned all my silliness was not only my sarcasm, but the beginnings of leadership was when I was in, I had a phenomenal platoon sergeant when I was in the Marines, a guy named Venable, who ended up being a Marine gunner, a warrant officer, a gunner. And then I had guys like Jensen, and then Chira Chira joined the Marines to escape the gangs in LA. And we actually saw him, had dinner with him last year.
Yeah.
And then those people, their lessons carried over to the Army. And then I had Haney and I had Fisher. And you kind of learn as you go. And now that I teach high school, JROTC here in Virginia, I take those lessons of leadership and I roll them up into my classes and the ethics classes, good, the bad, and the ugly, because you gotta see both sides. So, Echo Company was the foundation of my further career. Because team leader of a 6-man LURS team.
That's the best job in the Army.
Absolutely. So, but I was entrusted with, 4 or 5 other guys to plan missions to go execute as an NCO without any oversight once you're out there. Because you can always shut your radio off. You're like, oh, shit, it doesn't work.
Well, when you give your back brief to a full bird colonel or a 1-star general or something like that, and you're like an E6,
Correct.
or you're a brand new PFC who's just survived his thrashing to get on a team, and you're briefing the med,
Hey, I remember sitting in a back brief in Kosovo one day, and I want to say it was a guy named Colonel Hogg, Hogg.
Yeah.
And he comes floating in, and he wanted to light up a cigar in my fucking tent. I'm like, no, we're gonna smell like a cigar.
Yeah.
So, and it was, and it's about building relationships. So I still keep in touch with Nelson. He wrote me a letter of recommendation for OCS. My assistant team leader, when I got back from Kosovo, was a guy named Torres Brooks, who ended up being one of my IOBC instructors.
Yeah.
So, that's where you learn to mitigate risk, not become risk averse. So when I went back to Benning in March or more in March, and I was a guest speaker.
Yeah.
I got up there and I said my piece, that LURS needs to come, we need to have LURS back.
Yeah.
Everybody else has one, especially in Ukraine. It's showing you can use LURS, reconnaissance, surveillance, and drones. You can mate the two, they complement each other. But the problem is it becomes infighting in the Army. Who's in control? Do you split out an MI again in each division? What's the manning? And I'm like, it's already written down in the old LURS FM. You pull it out and you do it.
Go back and read the old books.
Correct. So, I contribute to everything that's behind me on this wall. Isn't a me thing, it's a them thing. So, to the Nelsons, to the Devons, to the Clunas, the Jensens, the Venables, to the Eric Lanes, to Colonel Albus. Well, I guess I can call him Chris now because he's retired. To the Albuses, even the aviation sergeant majors that I dealt with, you learn something good
from everybody.
But you also see something that you don't like, and you're kind of like, this is what I don't want to do. Excuse me, and not that they're bad leaders, but in my career, I've only had 2.
Wow.
I had Billingsley and I had Hayes, and those out of 30 years, I did pretty well.
That's pretty good.
And I've had great NCOs, I've had okay NCOs, and I've had, dude, how the hell did you get promoted NCOs?
And
so, there's 2 NCOs I got rid of in the Pathfinder company in Afghanistan. I sent them back home.
Yeah.
So, it's in the end, it's not about cool stuff as a leader. It's about cool stuff for your guys.
Yeah.
and it's you as a leader are entrusted with the best this country has to offer.
Well,
And
they deserve good leadership, and they deserve the support.
right. And they deserve, now that I'm retired, they deserve better than what they have now. So, it's, when I talk to my students, they're like, how did you guys do so well? I'm like, basic blocking and tackling. I said, when we rolled through Iraq in the initial invasion, it wasn't any cool guy stuff. It was old guys like me back then who
Yeah.
were founded in doctrine that we trained and we trained, and we didn't have all the distractions that they have now with soldiers getting on social media complaining, oh my God,
Yeah.
Army WTF, what the moments. So we didn't have that distraction. I think the only distraction we had was the FRG.
Yeah.
So but now that I'm retired, I get to every year I get to associate with guys like Gary Linder, Ron Piper, Ron Rucker, Sean McCarty, Marshall Huckabee. I get to see all these guys, Vietnam, Cold War guys that paved the way for the LURS community until it was disbanded.
Yeah. Well, I hope that I hope we are not the last generation of LURS. I really,
I hope not, but it's going to take a reckoning for the Army
it's going to take a bloody nose.
Right. And I blame a lot of this on Petraeus and his cronies for going to a counterinsurgency BS doctrine that was never going to work in the first place, but everything was plagiarized from the Marine Corps counterinsurgency stuff from Central America and Haiti in the 20s, and from the British in Malaysia. But it never what we did in Iraq doesn't equate to Afghanistan.
No. Well, there's a lot of differences.
Correct. So I would love to see it to come back. Hell, I would even do it. I'm not going to say for free. I would do it at a minimal cost to say, hey, this is how you rebuild everything.
Yeah.
But I don't, I'm old. I'm getting older, but the problem is I don't foresee it anytime soon because it's been gone. This is 2024. So it's been gone for 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's a 10-year gap.
Well, it's and from Vietnam, they shut down all the LERP companies, and I think the Guard still had 2 or 3. But
right. But they're, the problem is the Guard still gets their funding from the big Army.
Yeah.
Oh, they're gone too. So,
all the Guard are gone too. But I mean, we might see it come back.
And if it does,
there's institutional knowledge will be gone.
Right. And RSLC does a great job, but the problem with RSLC is it's doctrinal, not experience. So, how do you get back the experience to blend it with the doctrinal knowledge? You have to find old guys like us.
Or you expand it through blood and sweat.
Right. And the problem is all the lessons learned, like, as easy as taking that sticky glue that comes in a spray can, like spray paint, and throw sand on it on a poncho, all that, it's like, I like to equate it to building a poncho hooch. There's nothing in a manual that shows you how to do it. It's just handed down from generation to generation.
Well,
so
I don't, buddy, Ranger Rick.
There you go. I remember that. But here's the sad thing.
Yeah.
when I was at RTB as the commander, Delta Company, they were more worried about how do we keep, because they wanted to issue tents to every student. Oh yeah, remember how you used to have the old shelter house?
Yeah.
They wanted to do that for the Ranger students, and the big concern in a whole training meetings was how do we keep the Ranger students from sniffing the glue? I'm like, seriously, man, we have bigger concerns about it, bigger concerns about training than kids sniffing glue, and
Hey,
it is
Mark,
what it is.
this has been one of the best ones we've done, and I really appreciate this, man.
Hey, anytime. So it's
Well,
too.
I'll tell you what we might do. I'm going to have a one with one of my Afghan interpreters, and I've thought about maybe get like maybe with your interpreter and just have some warriors, some American warriors who fought in the GWAT, and some of our interps that we got out, and just kind of talk about Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's going to be a sore subject for a lot of people.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
it,
it should be.
I
I
think.
mean,
Have you ever seen the National Geographic special on it on that? So
uh,
I started watching it, and National Geographic put a special out, and it's about an SF team, if I remember right, that had to break the news to their Afghan counterparts that we were leaving.
oh my, yeah, I could that.
And we 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 built habitual relationships with these people. You
just
know,
just like we did with the Vietnamese, with the Hmong,
now Iraq, I could care less.
hard. Yeah,
Iraq it's Sunni and Shiite over there, and it is what it is.
yeah,
Iraq is, and if we don't do this right, they're going to be a province of Iran pretty
yeah,
soon. But the problem is with the Afghan. What you know you the world did that part of the world didn't want to see a democratic Afghanistan sandwiched between the terrorist haven of Pakistan and the terrorist state sponsor Iraq, or excuse me, Iran.
well, I could talk bad things about the Pakistani government for a long time.
Oh,
So
absolutely. They harbored terrorists. They
yeah,
went down to Quetta every winter. They did their war plans, and
yeah,
it is Pakistan is the same as, to me, North Vietnam. We
yeah,
wouldn't touch it
yeah,
because
yeah,
they knew that we knew that we knew that they knew that the Taliban was hanging out down the Holiday Inn down in Quetta, sunning and doing campaign plans while we were spinning our wheels with people like General Sinclair,
yeah.
who asked me in a brief how many blankets I've handed out during my tour.
Oh my
I'm
God.
like, dude, seriously? Whatever. So yeah,
Hey,
it is what it is.
hey, Mark, I
Yep.
want to get to the rally this year, but I've got to go to Fort Riley. But
Enjoy Fort Riley.
yeah, but let's definitely stay in touch, and we can solve the world's problems again and talk about some things. It's been a great interview,
Hey,
man.
how many people can you put on this Zoom thing?
I think I've seen up to 20 on
No
it.
kidding.
If we could do a pretty good round table.
Absolutely, we could. So I have a friend named John Burke. Um, and he's an interesting fellow. He got out of the Army as a staff sergeant.
Yeah.
The Army wouldn't promote him. I'm like, dude, you didn't do anything to. But anyway, he owns his own CBD store down in Dallas. Phenomenal dude. I'd do anything for that guy. But he has his own podcast, and he puts a bunch of people on,
I
and it's
like.
called Drunken Debates. So
If you send me the link to that, I'll look. I'd like to check that out.
yeah, it's interesting. He touches on some really weird stuff that I won't touch. Like
Okay.
he gets into the whole um political spectrum and women and the blah 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 blah. So, but if you could get somebody on here like Gary Linder,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, what we started out with this was I kind of wanted to get on the LURPS guys because the LURPS, our forefathers, they get the most attention.
Absolutely.
And that's why, and they deserve it.
Absolutely.
But
So, there's, there's, like I always like to say, the guys, I call them the pre-Kosovo guys.
Mhm.
Slurst didn't do much until Kosovo.
Yeah.
So you've got the pre-Kosovo guys that
got it going again.
they got it going again, and they proved it. But I think a lot of the problems from Lurs is we were our own enemies. Ball caps, too cool for school, long hair, and I gotta admit, I was part of the problem. But
I was too. I was too.
it's you gotta, you toss that aside. It was a phenomenal job, but the problem is the MI side of the world and the powers to be weren't really educated on it.
We didn't educate people. Well,
And
Mark, I'm gonna have to wrap this up here. Hey, friends, neighbors, countrymen, we're gonna be it's been a phenomenal interview with Mark. And if you're a LURS guy and you're not already a member of the LRRA, you should be. So
absolutely. Hey, it's cheap. So $25 a year.
yeah,
Every year we have a rally at Branson.
and it's a great party. It's a great.
Oh my God. I will take pictures and send them to you this year.
Okay.
Next year's our 10-year reunion. So what's different about this year is it's the 80th anniversary D-Day this year. And then next year is our actual 10-year anniversary of the LRA.
Well, next year I'm going to be there come hell or high water.
Same here. I'll quit my job. I don't care.